The claves, fascinating instrument. Perhaps one of the first that humans picked up. 2 sticks, strike them, and they've evolved a lot. What's important about the claves is the concept of the claves. There's a lot of variations of rhythm and sound. The claves, you know, if you hold them correctly by making a little cup with one hand, like a little bit of a resonating chamber, and sitting the clave up there like so, as opposed to grabbing it, it's a big difference in the sound because then the wood resonates. Here's the difference between this and this. Now that kind of a pattern also comes into Latin American music through African sacred music, because a similar pattern would be played usually in triple meter on a bell, on some kind of a metallic instrument, a bell of some kind. And that is used as the timeline to accompany most sacred music. In the Congo tradition, Yoruba tradition, Arara tradition, that's a commonality. So you could take a rhythm usually played on bell that sounds like this, for example. That's used to accompany sacred music. Mo we ma ye 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 oh, mo we ma ye ye. Mo we ma ye 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 oh, mo we ma ye ye. Imbala ye oh, we ma ye 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 oh. Mo we ma ye 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 oh. The rhythm of the melody is very important, how it adheres, and it uses the bell pattern as its basis. It's a very specific way that the song fits rhythmically with the pattern. That idea has made its way into popular music, into the rumba, into the song, and into the idea of composing and arranging. That's where it's really evolved. So the melodies of these traditional sacred songs carry the rhythm of the clave. And if I play that slow, you could kind of see that. If I go like this, you could see how the rhythms are interlaced. Mo we ma ye 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 oh, mo we ma ye ye. Mo we ma ye 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 oh, mo we ma ye ye. Imbala ye oh, oh we ma ye ye oh. It's right on top of this rhythmically. And if you try to mess with that, you're wrong. You're out of clave, so to speak. If you try to play that on the other side of the rhythm, it won't fit. It fights. You know, if you put it anywhere else on the rhythm, it's going to fight. So basically, that's the concept with clave. In Cuba, the term clave and the use of this instrument really took a big height. And in a lot of other countries, it didn't go as far. And even in the United States, it's very present in what we do in the United States because it's a Western Central African phenomenon that the rhythms are based on this kind of yin-yang thing, that there's this side of the clave and this side. And the melodic rhythmic figures adhere to this kind of balance. People get very upset if you mess up the clave. And other people say, oh, I don't care about the clave. And the clave is like this restriction. I don't need to have that. And other people from other countries will say, no, our music doesn't have clave, but it does. You know, a lot of times it happens I hear it happen a lot with Brazilian music. The Brazilian musicians don't study clave per se as part of their music, but their music is very much in clave. Their music, it makes sense with the concept of the clave. The rhythms they play adhere to the melodies, and they're very conscious about it. And if you play it wrong, they'll stop you in a moment and say, you got the rhythm wrong. They won't tell you you're out of clave, because that's a terminology that kind of comes out of the Cuban music tradition. But the music is in clave. That's where the concept of the clave becomes important. That it's about matching melody to the rhythm of the clave. So, in a nutshell, you have to take your melody, figure out the best way the clave goes with it, lock it into that. Then you're free to build your arrangement around that. And counterpoint is very important. You could put counterpoint rhythm, but you can't mess with the idea of the melody and the clave. That has to be a certain way. You can't mess with that. Now in New Orleans, the clave is there but they often crossed the clave because it didn't get hammered home the way it did with the more African tradition and African instruments that happen in Cuba, for example. So in New Orleans music, you hear it played all over the place. In second line music, they play it on the snare in Mardi Gras, with the accent of the clave. And the music, though, is in clave. Again, some of you may have heard this song before, a New Orleans thing that goes, my grandma and your grandma sitting by the fire. My grandma said to your grandma, I'm gonna set your place on fire. Talking about, hey now, hey now, hey now, hey now, aiko, ane. Oh, chagamofina, ainane. Chagamofina, ane. That was a big hit when I was a kid, and then somebody made a hip hop version of it a while back. But that melody is totally in clave. And sometimes you'll hear in New Orleans music, you know, they're not paying attention so much to the clave. The music is automatically, naturally in clave, and they'll play it that way. But sometimes it'll be cross, and they're not tripping on it. In Cuban music, if it gets cross, somebody's gonna like stop you or give you a weird look or something, because it's really paramount in Cuban music. That said, there's some Cuban music that's out of clave too. But just understanding the concept of the clave, and as a composer, arranger, you have to keep the clave in mind. You can't randomly write parts that rhythmically don't have the clave in mind. And there's an idea of writing in clave where a certain section of the tune, the clave can change, but you have to build your arrangement so that it happens naturally. So that if you were playing clave through the piece, you wouldn't have to stop or jump the clave or change the rhythm in order to adhere it to the melody. Instead, the composition works around the rhythm of the clave. One of the most amazing things is that in the Cuban rumba groups, the clave is essential. And who plays it? Usually the lead singer. It's amazing. The lead singer has to improvise rhythmically and melodically while holding this rhythm. Ah la la, ah la 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 la, ah la 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 la, ah la 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 la. Well, the phrasing is like, you know, all around, but that clave has to be solid, locking with the drums. So you find a degree of independence that's created by learning rumba songs that are kind of free, you know, sometimes from the clave. But when you come to the antiphonal part, the call and response, that response has to be in the right place with the clave. And if it's not, immediately, almost before the words out of your mouth, they go, no, you know, cruzado, montado, you know, cuidado, like, be careful, you know, you're out of line if you come out with the clave in the wrong spot.